Yep.
We should see how many accountants and lawyers we can get on the show. Oh, wait.
No way. Shit. No more.
Maximum capacity. So,
Yeah.
Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 200 of Bourbon Pursuit. I'm one of your hosts, Kenny, and did you just hear what I said? It was episode 200. This is monumental, it's huge. Now, I'm not going to talk about it because we talk a lot about it in the show, or maybe just a little bit. I don't know, we're kind of proud of ourselves here, but thank you so much for joining us and being a part of this monumental occasion, and it's because of you, our listeners, why this has been so successful. So keep tuning in, and we're going to keep bringing you good original bourbon content. Now on with a little bit of the news. Adam Hurst of the LA Whiskey Society has uncovered the world's oldest whiskey. It's a 12-year-old Pennsylvania rye distilled in 1847. It's been passed down through generations of family as well as estate sales until it ended up in the hands of someone asking more about its origin. The link to the website in our show notes goes through intensive detail of the label, glass, seal, cork condition, and even guesses what the whiskey is comprised of, because back then there was no notion of, oh, hey, what's your mash bill? And really also, what is the importance of discovering this ancient artifact? And I guess I say ancient in relatively new terms here. But having a bottle from pre-Civil War era is a window into the age of whiskey history that at this point, only documentation's been around. So other than that, there hasn't been much else. And now historians have reviewed the advertisements, bill of sales, and other records, and we now have a legitimate bottle of whiskey from over 160 years ago. Go read the in-depth analysis from the link in our show notes. Are you coming to the Bourbon Trail and happen to be staying in Louisville, Kentucky? Well, Ryan and I, we get asked all sorts of questions all the time of where should we go eat or where should we get a drink? Well, we went ahead and started creating a collection, and we put it on Yelp. And you can go and get that in our show notes. It's loaded with casual and fine dining choices, dessert spots, as well as our favorite places to grab a cocktail or a glass of bourbon at one of our local watering holes around town. Now, with that, let's hear from our good friend Joe over at Barrel Bourbon, and then you've got Fred Minnick with Above the Char.
Hi, this is Joe Beatrice from Barrel Craft Spirits. Batch 16 was a project that took over a year. We selected 9 to 15-year-old barrels with similar profiles from different distilleries. It's deeply concentrated, but not too oaky, and finishes with a toasted orange note. Find out more at barrelbourbon.com.
I'm Fred Minnick, and this is Above the Char. I stood in the middle of a liquor store aisle. A consumer asked the retailer what was the most smooth bourbon on the shelf. Now, the retail attendant is just someone who's doing his job. He meant well, and he picked out 5 or 6 bourbons that he thought were smooth. And he did it based on proof. They were all 80 or 90 proof, when in reality, the bourbons that he picked were actually a little hot for their proofs. So he completely eliminated things like Four Roses single barrel, which is 100 proof, or Knob Creek, which is 100 proof, or Booker's, which, gets up there in the 120 proof range. Completely ignored them all, despite them being very smooth. And we see smooth being used in all sorts of marketing. We're talking about going back to the earliest forms of whiskey marketing, and you'll find the words smooth. Well, what does that mean? What does smooth actually mean? In a sense, it's meant to be a word that kind of covers the word good. But in reality, smooth really does have a true definition within the industry. As I recall, many people saying, but most notably, Jim Rutledge, talked about smoothness being about how does it feel on the palate and how does it burn. If it burns at any point in a major way, then it is not smooth for you. So from the moment that it hits your palate to all the way down to the belly, if it's burning at any point in that process, then it is not smooth for you. But just like taste is very subjective, what tastes good to me may not taste good to you. And so what is smooth for me, a grizzled and veteran whiskey drinker, may not be smooth for someone who's just getting in the game. So there's really no right answer for what is smooth. But I'll tell you what isn't smooth. Vodka. Vodka sucks. And that's this week's Above the Char. Hey, if you have an idea for Above the Char, hit me up on Twitter or Instagram, just like Drew Scott did on May 4th. He's the one who came up with the idea for what the term smooth means. Well, actually, he said to stop using the term smooth when describing whiskey. I decided to give it a little bit of a definition instead. But hey, if you've got an idea, send it to me. That's at Fred Minnick. Again, that's at Fred Minnick. And thank you, Drew, for that wonderful idea. Until next week, cheers.
This is the 200th episode of Bourbon Pursuit. Welcome back, everybody. We here with the 32nd recording of the Bourbon Community Roundtable. I'm glad I haven't gotten my numbers mixed up in my head yet because we were really anticipating this day. It's kind of a huge milestone for us. So, Ryan, congratulations. Like an Adrian, like we did it moment. Should we be like running up the stairs, Rocky style?
I know. We need the Evan Williams bottle, red label with the 200, wrapped around it. We need that, wrapped around this episode. Yeah, it's amazing. I can't believe, gosh, how is that possible? that we've done 200 episodes. That's amazing. And a lot of cool stuff we've done over the past few years. So congrats to you.
Well, it's to all of us and to the whole community roundtable here as well. These guys have been a very big part of making this show successful as well. These community roundtables are one of the most downloaded episodes that we have. I think it's just people love it when you bitch about bourbon, and they love to hear the banter of what goes on. So with that, I'm actually celebrating since I don't have like an Evan Williams 2th anniversary. I figured I'd grab like a Henry McKenna bottled and bond at 100 proof, and I got a Pursuit Series 04 to 100 proof. Mix them together, and I guess it's 200.
How long did you think about that? How long did you think about doing that before?
I thought a few hours early. I was like, what can I do to celebrate? Because I saw Blake's post. He said, what are we drinking that to celebrate? And I said, I have no idea. I guess I'll just grab 200 proof bourbons and mix them together. That's about as close as I can think of with something ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, could you get to a 200-year-old bourbon? Like, what's in your stash you could grab?
Get 3 final reserves or something.
Yeah. How close could you get in a glass within next? I thought tonight's roundtable, we're actually going to turn it around and we're all going to interview you and Ryan about the highlights of the last 200 episodes.
Sure, I like it.
Some of your favorite moments.
You could, but I think people get bored pretty quickly.
Yeah, we're not that exciting.
All in all, we don't care all that much. No, just kidding.
Yeah, remember the premise of the show is never about us. We're the dumbasses that are the ones that ask all the questions. So
and that's what episode number 200 is for.
You asked me a question, I'm like, definitely don't know.
So with that, let's go ahead and let's go around the table as usual and introduce everybody. Blake's already chimed in, so Blake, I'll let you go first.
Yes, I am Blake from bourboner.com and sealbox.com. You can find me at bourboner.com, BOURBONR, or all the social medias that correspond with that, as well as sealbox.com. That's SEELBACHS. And I'm drinking one of my current favorite bottles off of Sealbox. It's a J. Henry & Sons. It's their 5-year bourbon that's finished in cognac barrels. So really good stuff. Check it out.
Awesome. Good deal. And a face that we haven't seen in a while, Nick from Breaking Bourbon, man. How you been?
I'm catching up on sleep finally here, guys. But glad to be back. I tried to make the last 2 and kind of last minute I was like, Jordan, I'm sorry. I am not going to be home in time for this. So can you jump on? And he was always excited to jump on. So he's been doing a bunch of them here lately. But anyways, I'm Nick from breakingbourbon.com. Check us out online, breakingbourbon.com, obviously, and all the social media is all at Breaking Bourbon. I will kind of reminiscing a little bit. I remember us being guests on Bourbon Pursuit years ago. I can't remember the episode number, but it was in the first, series run of them is before we were doing video. So it was all audio. Eric and I were over at his house. Jordan was at his house. Kenny and Ryan, we couldn't see you guys. I'm not sure where you were exactly, but I remember we were talking about the bourbon storage experiment and kind of excited because I had been listening to you guys from the beginning, from your first episode forward. And it was the first, podcast and the first time we had done anything like that. So just kind of thinking back about that now, was that 2 years ago, 3 years ago? I can't remember at this point. But yeah, kind of, fun, exciting run here and excited to see where it goes from here.
That was definitely one of my highlight episodes, with you guys.
Don't make these other guys feel bad.
Thanks a lot, jerk.
Yeah. I paid him to say that.
Yeah.
Three bottles in the mail for him.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the big things and the great things about what we've really done here in the Roundtable is, it all started off. Each one of you had your own sort of singular episode before we even decided, like, hey, let's get on and do, kind of come on this together. So it was good with that. So if anybody really wants to see how bad our interview skills were in the first 50 episodes, then you can go and check those
if you
out.
think they're bad now, just listen to the first
I actually listened to a little bit of Roundtable number 1 last night. Or yesterday.
Wow, you must have been
I think whenever you sent it out. Yeah. I was like, what did it sound like on the first one? Yeah.
It was
you had
5 kids. How the hell do you have time to go?
I do that at work. I don't actually work. I just but no, it's one of those ones where it's had good personality,
That's exactly.
Everybody's on their iPhone headphones.
They try
Nobody
hard.
had actual mics or filters or where we're at now. So
Yeah, they were all vintage, and it turns out they were auditions for this. So
exactly.
It's been a good journey, that's for sure. And so, Brian, I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, sure, everyone. I'm Brian with Sippin' Corn. You can find me on the social medias, SIPPNCORN, and sippincorn.com and bourbonjustice.com. So check that out. It's a book available on Amazon and through Potomac, and on the website bourbonjustice.com. I was also thinking back to the early time that I was on the show to begin with, but that was replaced last night when I met a bunch of guys for a wild turkey tasting, and practically everyone there had something to say about the Bourbon Community Roundtable. And that's when it really struck me how we're able to connect with so many different people from so many different walks of life. And Kenny and Ryan, you guys have done great on this. I mean, it's just the reach that you guys have had, and the popularity of it is just fantastic. So congratulations on 232 of the roundtables.
Thank you, sir. It's all due to our good legal advice.
Navigate those legal waters. That's right.
For sure.
I feel like I'm doing my own little barrel bourbon blend over here, like mixing this the Kentucky and Tennessee stuff. It's actually pretty good mixing these two together.
Are you really mixing them together?
I really did. I mixed them together. I wasn't just joking.
You never know what you're gonna get.
Yeah, I followed through with my promises.
But the next Pursuit series.
Yeah, there you go. And the other thing is, Fred couldn't be here tonight. He said that he had a pretty wild derby. Going to parties, and he's just finally getting to the point where he was at home and his 5-year-old son said, "Dad, when are we going to hang out again?" And I said, "Yeah, you need to spend time with your family. That's totally fine." So we're going to be sans Fred on this one, but that's okay. And, speaking of that with the derby, let's have a little bit of a post-mortem because let's talk a little bit of thoughts on the race. I know we got 3 guys here from Kentucky, 2 that think they're from Kentucky. So let's try to get an idea of what your all's thoughts were just in the race in general, because it was kind of a wild finish.
Yeah, first I'd like to clarify. I don't think I'm from Kentucky. We're from Florida. I mean, my thoughts on the race were it's kind of messed up when you look at the I go back to the NCAA tournament because that's sports I actually care about. And who was it? Virginia against Auburn. It's like, was it a foul at the game? The last shot of the game. By the book, yeah, it probably was a foul. Do you make that call at that time? I don't know. I would probably say no. So I was not for the call. I thought. There's probably a lot of other places that could have been called where it just kind of gets overlooked. But I'm not a huge horse racing fan, so it's kind of hard for me to weigh in with any kind of credibility. All I know is I watched the race. I walked outside and started cooking more, and my wife came outside and said, "Oh, yeah, they're actually recalling it," or I forget what she used. But, yeah, so all in all, I'd say would rather just see the horses run and, if there's a little bit of bumping, so be it. But
Yeah, sounds like a lot like your bourbon
Floridians. That's a Floridian's opinion.
Not a good party unless there's a little bit of bumping at some point.
No bumping and grinding.
I don't see nothing wrong with a little.
Like a Jodeci album's getting ready to come on or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But-
I think I got to kind of agree with that. I honestly, we watched the race and we had people over, and before they even made that call, we were doing something else and kind of lost track of it. It wasn't until the next day that that became apparent and kind of went back and looked at it. And, I guess tough call, at the end of the day. I mean, there are animals out there running in a circle. One animal moved over a little bit in front of another animal. The rules are the rules, I guess, but it did seem really surprising and kind of shocking that they did make that call.
Well, it's definitely shocking. It's the first time it's ever happened in the Derby that the winner lost. And I'm no steward, all of those disclaimers, but I'll disagree with you guys just to have a different opinion. The people who I do know who are in the horse business were just working on how dangerous that move really was. And it's not just the animal moving over into the lane. It's the jockey being reckless and going for that spot. Whatever happens, be damned. He's going to go for that spot. And if they would have clipped hooves, which was really close to happening, you would have had two horses that were shot on the track. And if that happened in the Derby, they had to pull out the blue tarp and kill some horses. That'd just be devastating. So I think they have to be careful like this, and if that's the risk, then you got to call them like that.
Yeah,
is that a real thing? Like they pull out the blue tarp and
they
put a horse down?
Well, they
put him down on the track.
Yeah, they'll haul out an ambulance, kind of cover them up, and then euthanize them if it's so bad that they don't think they can save him. So yeah, you got to think these horses are. I think I said this last night to Kenny. I mean, these horses are, 1,000 plus on these really frail, skinny legs. And, it's kind of like targeting within, in college football. If you get targeted with the helmet to helmet, you get ejected, it sucks because yes, it is like, part of the game you're hitting, but at the same time, you're trying to protect these animals. And they say it's animals, but they're very highly trained animals this is all they do. And so the jockey knew what he was doing and they have to do it to protect these animals. And so while it does suck, it is the right call. And that's the way it needs to be.
Is that where they fell on that? Did they fall on the jockey was definitely behind it more or less, or that the horse had just moved out of position?
The jockey tried to say that the horse got scared by the other one. I'm like, well, that happens every race, this is not nothing new. And so, he can control that animal in that situation. So, but I'm not a jockey and I don't ride, but I do think they would have made that call. No question in any regular race. And so I'm glad that they did it on such a big stage, but it did piss a lot of people off because that was a favor and a lot of money was on that horse.
Yeah, let's just make sure we reaffirm that none of us are like blood stock. Like we have no skin in the game. We actually have no idea. Yeah. We're just commenting to comment. So
I have even less credibility in horse racing than I do in bourbon. So take for what that's worth.
So with that, we'll switch it up and talk about some bourbon a little bit because, bourbon was out in full force at the Derby. For anybody that wasn't paying attention, Brown Forman really has their time in the spotlight when it comes to it. Woodford Reserve and Old Forester are there during Oaks and Derby. And there are a lot of Mint Juleps that are sold there during that day. Now, one thing is that I enjoy a mint julep during the season. I think it's just like a classic thing. I don't know why. I just kind of got hooked on them a little bit. I even had a mint julep recipe I put out there. However, there's a lot of people that are kind of the hardcore bourbon people that are saying that you're bastardizing good bourbon. If you're going to make a mint julep, take all the other crap out there and just give me the bourbon. So what do you guys think? Do you look at it as a kind of like a timeless classic, or is it something that, maybe a bourbon nerd should probably just quit drinking a mint julep?
You got to have a mint julep at the track. It's like it's just they go hand in hand. I mean, it's a tradition. It's And the Old Forester actually is pretty good pre-mixed Mint Julep. They're dangerously like sneaky strong. I had several, and I ran into Kenny, and I was like, I had 2 or 3, and then the next day I like woke up in my track outfit on the couch, and so I was like, it's like what's in these things, or did Kenny
like your track outfit, like the outfit you went to the track in, or like
exactly.
You're in like a jersey and like short shorts on?
Run DMD.
No, like I was thinking the latter at first, actually, Blaze. So I appreciate the clarification.
On my running track outfit,
like things got real crazy if you got into a whole new outfit.
Yeah, not my spikes and spandex, but my suit and whatever. But no, you got to do a mint julep. I love mint juleps. Kenny makes one of the best mint juleps. I mean, they're hard to drink all the time, but at the track Kentucky Derby, it's quintessential Derby stuff. So,
and just a quick little history, because I was sitting there Googling at it. The mint julep has actually been associated with the Kentucky Derby since 1938. And even before then, it's been documented that it was actually in literature as early as 1784 that it was for curing sickness of the stomach. So,
amen.
There we go. I guess we don't have any medical people here on the show, so nobody can really comment about that one. But there is some history associated.
The Holiday Inn Express.
How's that different from anything else, Ken?
You're right.
We're pretending we're stewards, from the.
I've got a medallion back here somewhere.
Yeah.
So, anybody else have any kind of comments on that? Like, is it a bastardization of bourbon, or is it still have its rightful place in history?
I'll say I'm a big fan of mint juleps. I tend to drink old fashions and mint juleps when it comes to mixed bourbon drinks. Not too often, but I will say over time, probably more juleps than old fashions now. It's great in the summer. I kind of got sick of going to the store to get mint, so I started growing some in the yard. It grows like a weed. It grows really well. It stays really well in the fridge once I pull it. So I just think it's a fantastic, easy drink that, people always tend to really like. Not usually as strong as I make them, so I have to remember that. With other people, kind of let them know to let it simmer for a little while and pick up some of the ice to kind of water it down. But I think it's a fun, great summer drink. Nothing wrong with mixing bourbon if that's what you want to do.
So I feel like somebody needs to take the opposite position here. This is a terrible idea. I'm not that far, but what does get me a little bit every year is the amount of, I don't know if everybody else gets them, but like the text of like, hey, they're making $2,500 Mint Julep TV. Man, I wish you could do something like that. I'm like, okay, like it's for charity. I get it. I'm completely okay with that side. But they're just taking Woodford Reserve. It's just a regular mint julep in a fancy cup. But
no, it's like glacier water. And
well, that was one year. One year they did glacier water. This year, I believe they did like a honey simple syrup mint. And basically, it was a barrel aged simple syrup that was done like for a year or something like that.
But pick mint from the infield or something. I don't know. But that was. It never ceases to amaze me. I mean, it's great publicity for Woodford, but why they're the ones where they really get credit for the Kentucky Derby,
because they pay for it.
Yeah, I guess so. That's true. They got them Brown Forman pockets, but no. So I'm a once a year mint julep kind of guy. 364 days a year. If you ask me what I would like, mint julep is never in the top 10. But it's hot. It's April, or May. What day was it?
Wow. Let it slide. He should really weigh in on the horse.
I had pneumonia last week, so my week's kind of running together at this point. But no, it's warm outside. It's like, okay, it's there's a lot of ice in there, and nobody wants to just sit around drinking bourbon and eat when it's 85 degrees out. So for that, I let it slide. Any other day of the week or any other day of the year, I'm not for a mint julep.
Well, and I think, too, it has a place as if you're going to be day drinking because you're going to the track all damn day. That's your starter drink. That's your morning drink. You don't necessarily want bourbon neat if it's 90 degrees out. don't always want to start off with a barrel proof bourbon neat. So warm up to it. Start with a couple of juleps. That helps set a base, and you're good for the day.
And then you can wake up in your track outfit. Yeah.
And you wake up in your track outfit.
Next thing you know, you're in velour jumpsuit and you're spinning on the floor.
Yep.
So the other thing that we kind of see with bourbon and horses, and Brian saw a little of this before we started, so hopefully he's been trying to think of this beforehand. But I kind of want to put a question and actually kind of test your knowledge. How many brands can you name that have a horse on the label? Go ahead, start naming them off.
So we got on the label, or just on
just
the
bourbon and horse, like
Bland's
some sort
has
of
a horse
connection
on it. Bullet at one point had Thoroughbred, which had a horse on it.
Four Roses had Secretariat, had a horse on it.
Don't forget.
This is good.
See, who else do we have?
Don't forget Gifted Horse.
Gifted Horse. Oh,
Yep.
was that bad?
got Rock Hill Farms,
Rock Hill Farms.
Calumet is one. Pinhook's a new one that's kind of relatively.
All their different brands have it.
Think of Smooth Ambler. They've got
Yeah,
Smooth
they
Ambler
did.
as one.
What, the 10 or? Was
I think any of the old scouts, I think,
Maybe
have
the old
a,
Scouts.
Scout?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's it.
Sure, there's a horse on some Yippee Ki
Oh,
Yeah, PKA has it.
some people were saying Chestnut Farms from Total Wine.
Chestnut Farms, yeah.
Old Carter. I don't remember Old Carter, the new
Feel
one
like
that's
Old
came out.
Carter,
Yeah. That has it on there.
It's 11.
Yeah, and somebody said Maker's Mark. I don't recall, unless you're just talking about like the whatever
blue
kind of
and yellow
special
one,
releases that they have and stuff like that. Yeah.
Rumor is that Pursuit Series number 10 may have horse on it, and it's Ryan in his tracksuit on the back of the horse.
Nice.
He's not actually
It's
on
on my
it. He's just kind of like just wavered to the side because he can't, because his spine just gave out after that.
He's getting thrown off the horse.
You can get him on the penny horse at Kroger in a tracksuit. That's what needs to go on the label.
Now that's
I'm ready
I
for
would pay
photo
for
shoot.
that. Yeah.
Woodford Derby bottles is mentioned in
Well,
the
sure enough, yeah. Every year.
Yeah,
Plenty of
so
those.
there's a lot of ties just with horses and bourbon, as we can just see that from the sheer array of stuff that's out there. So I guess if you want a bottle to sell, put a horse on it.
Yeah.
think
Well, it's
that's-
like old historical names and horses is what sells in bourbon, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Think about the two imagery. That's typically what it is.
And Tony just mentioned Bell Mead as well. Another one we forgot about.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Associating an animal with the label too of a spirit tends to help it. Tends to do better. Wine will do that too.
Makes
You'll
it
see
taste
that a lot
better
in
too.
wine. Of course it does.
Damn. We
You
need
can
an
put the
animal
age of the animal on it too.
All right. So while we're talking about animals and spirit animals, Nick, if you were to start a brand and put a spirit animal on it, what's your spirit animal?
Dragon.
Dragon glass.
Does that have something to do with tax season too? I mean, I have no
Yeah.
idea.
I was just thinking of the movie Coco for some reason. I don't know why.
I thought you were going to say How to Train Your Dragon, because that's been on repeat in the Bourboner household as of recently.
I don't know why my kids don't like that for whatever reason. I love the movie and they watched it once. No, we refuse to watch that again.
Guys, this is actually good.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on because, Bell Mead was just mentioned, and Bell Mead is part of one of the things that kind of leads us into this next conversation, and this is just seeing what's happened with MGP lately. MGP prices are skyrocketing. Mic Drop is trading for around Mic Drop, I think, number one or maybe number two. I can't forget which one. It's trading at the same value as a Pappy 23. There's now a dedicated Facebook trading group of only MGP. And I'm seeing more brands in that group than I've ever even heard of before. And you see people that are trying to sort of figure out where's the next distillery with age stock of MGP that's selling it. And then they're hoarding it. And then it's just kind of like moving on to the next one. So can you guys think of like when this phenomenon began of people that just started going crazy over MGP?
It's funny, like, I don't know, we'll have to look back at it wasn't too long ago where we were like talking about, isn't it just MGP that they're just putting it out there, and like, nobody was buying it because they're like, isn't it just another MGP? And it's funny how the tides have turned to the other. And I'm not sure what started. I'm sure with anything in bourbon, there's less and less age stock of it. So now people think it's better, which it is great. I mean, I love 12-year MGP, 13, 14 is some of the best stuff out there. But yeah, I don't get it.
Because
But I
I mean, sorry, go ahead. I mean, yeah, just go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say, I think at one point when it was kind of behind a brand and, you knew they're making it, but you knew you had a pretty big accessible brand, that was one thing. But now that you're seeing these smaller niche brands with MGP, with, in some cases, age statements, in other cases, just a limited number of bottlings, limited number of bottles, it's got some hype, some momentum behind it. I think people have come around to the fact that MGP really knows what they're doing. I mean, they're good at making whiskey. There's no question about that. And in combination with people that are good at marketing whiskey, and in some cases it is really good whiskey, I think that's that snowball's kind of happened here. And, it's if there's enough different about the label, enough different about, people are talking about it, that's going to generate that snowball effect for it. I think that's what we're kind of seeing happen. You're no longer having the, I'm a big sourcer of bourbon and I'm going to make everything taste the same. And, that's going to be our goal. Instead, you're saying, no, I'm going to make a niche product with a small, number of bottles, and I'm going to make that look and feel special. And MGP is behind in a lot of cases that, and it's getting more limited to find the older stuff. That's what's happening. And people want it because the momentum is finally built up.
Well, I see it. It's a little odd because I think if you can just Google it. I think there's a article out there that says your craft distiller is actually coming from a warehouse in Indiana.
Factory.
Factory in Indiana.
I think
that's exactly what it was. And I remember that. I remember when that came out years ago. And that's kind of what helped kind of kickstart my education, because that was something that I wasn't necessarily always up to snuff about. And that's really when you start learning how to read labels. You understand when it says distilled in Indiana, like all of a sudden, like the cogs should start clicking together and the gears start moving. But it's funny because at that time there was this stigma or this kind of like thought process that people said, well, why would you just want to buy somebody's source whiskey? Like, why don't you just go buy somebody that is distilling it and making themselves, like it's transparency on the label? But now it's kind of done a complete 180 where people are like, oh yeah, I just want that. Like, I don't care if it says Traverse City or Blom Brothers or whatever it is. Like, I just want the juice that's inside.
Yeah, I mean,
I agree with Nick. I think it's a lot, sorry, Blake. I agree with Nick. It's a lot of marketing. I mean, my word, it's the same stuff that's been out. And like Kenny, like you say, originally people poo-pooed it because it all came from Indiana. So the only thing different is how it's marketed and the price that they charge for it. So I don't know. So go ahead, Blake.
Yeah, so I would kind of go with that. It's proven itself as a really good thing. So. But there is some differences, for me, it goes back to like the Smooth Ambler days when they were sourcing and putting out a lot, where that was what first really turned me on to MGP, was like, oh, wow, this stuff is really good. And then, you taste some from other distilleries or brands and labels, that kind of stuff. And it's like, this is MGP, but it tastes different. So it becomes a little bit of a collector thing too. It's like with Buffalo Trace. Yeah, I love Buffalo Trace, but why wouldn't I just buy the Buffalo Trace brand? Why do I still try to buy the Stags and all that of the world? Because there's difference in the barrels. So I would agree it is marketing, but who's the one really doing the marketing? Because MGP, I mean, what they spend, a couple $100 a year on marketing or something. And it's really these labels and brands that are kind of giving the push behind it. But with these kind of groups and everything, they aren't really looking at the marketing nearly as much, in my opinion. They're focused on the actual bourbon, and then it just becomes a little bit of a cultish thing. And it's like, Stitzelweller all that much better? Is it $2,000 better than a comparable bottle? Probably not, but it's got a little bit of a cachet behind it that gives it that extra boost that it needs. So, and I also say that because I have an MGP pick coming out pretty soon, so it's going to be worth at least $700 a bottle. So, but it is. It's getting harder to find these distilleries and that have aged product. A lot of it's 4 and 6 years old,
Yeah.
I just happened to find, Bull Run has some that's close to 13, well, a little over 13 years old, and it's you don't see that popping up nearly as much anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a good point from Blake, because there's a huge gap between, like you said, the 4 to 5 year MGP juice to the 12 to 13, 14. There's not really anything in between. And so like you have like a very rare supply of the older age stuff and then a huge gap until it's younger. And so that age stuff is just getting kind of hyped because of the supply side of that. And that's probably with most bourbons out there today, because there is a huge gap in all bourbons from 5 years to 10 to 12.
Frank has a pretty good theory in the chat. He said, in my perspective, the allocation game has drove MGP promotion, which might be somewhat true. You can't get your hands on a regular bottle of Blanton's anymore, but you have some really good age stock of MGP that's floating around from multiple distilleries that, yeah, you can get your hands on pretty well. So that's a pretty good theory behind it as well. The other thing, we talked about the marketing aspect. I don't know if I agree with the way these brands were doing marketing. I think it's been the community of the underground groups that have really been able to pick and find these things. If I recall, like one of the first ever Blom Brothers picks that I saw came out of Corkin Bottle up in Northern Kentucky. And then after that, it's like everybody just swarms to something and they just gobble it all up, they eat it up. And then now like Blum Brothers is crushed. Like they have no more like age stock that they're putting to do their single barrel program. Same thing happened to Boone County. Like Boone County does $175 per bottle now through their gift shop of the same 13, 14 year MGP juice. And so it's this community, I think, that is very bullish in regards of how they are going about acquiring this through multiple means of finding these distilleries.
But part of that too is how small the end outlet is, though, that's actually putting their label on it and selling it, that people can identify that, okay, it is something that's different from something else out there. It's, ultimately put together and bottled by this company over here, whether that company is deliberately somehow reaching those people or it's just by chance that they're being reached, and then they're small enough that relatively small number of people can make a run on it. It's almost as if you separate it into what's behind it. So you've got the distillation, and then you've got ultimately the blending in most cases, in some cases single barrel, just identifying what those are, and then you've put the label on it. I think what's behind it as well is people have recognized that MGP from a distillation perspective can do and has done a very good job, and they've done a good job. They've made really good bourbons, and some companies are good at finding what those are and bottling them, whether they're blending it or doing single barrels or whatever. I think the communities kind of recognize that and giving them that credit. And when that happens, they, just like you said, Kenny, people are jumping on it because they believe they believe it's true, and they believe that can be a really good bourbon.
But it doesn't even have to be a good bourbon, though. I mean, that's the thing. If you're starting a new brand now, the recipe is to source it, to release under 2,000 bottles, and to have a really cool label. And you just generate that hype, and it sells. And the other point is to have a really high price for it. So limited supply, really high price, cool label, limited number for sale, and that just drives it. And like you guys are saying, people eat it up, and it feeds itself.
I also see this as like an expansion too. For a while there was, and maybe I was part of the problem too, is you're a Kentucky snob at first, and all you want to drink is Kentucky bourbon whiskey, and then all of a sudden you hear about this distilled MGPI Indiana sort of stuff, and you kind of you write it off for the longest time. And then all of a sudden somebody introduces you to it, you get a few smooth amblers, you do all, and you kind of start enjoying it. And so it kind of starts breaking this mold now where everybody at some point just said like, oh, like Kentucky it. And now it's like, okay, well, Kentucky and Indiana, like how far is this going to go until it keeps spreading to say like, okay, well, now we can say at least 16 states in the US are producing good whiskey. So I think it's also going to be a kind of a breaking the mold of just how people envision and think of where can they get their bourbon now too.
Yeah, no doubt. Because most people, they want the Kentucky name, they want the Kentucky brand behind it, and that gives them a lot of validity and credit that it's going to be something good. But when in reality, and we're Kentuckians and we do make the best bourbon, there is a lot of good people out there making some really good juice that's can compete with us for sure. But there's that stigma though, that if it's not Kentucky, then it's kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, it'll take a few years for that stigma to go, and I think at this point, like what MGP and Distilled in Indiana does, when you see that in the back label, now people's ears perk up. They're like, all right, cool, it's going to be good Indiana stuff. And so I think it's just going to take time.
Well, one last thought too. I think maybe like something like Templeton Rye probably hurt MGP for a little bit, or because like you said, that article came out, and then they're like, well, if everybody's doing it, then those brands, they just suck, or that's not, I'm not going to buy that. And then, but once they actually try it, then their opinions change. But it's hard to break that opinion when it's so strong against it.
Absolutely. And so when Ian the Bourbon Guy just said, Kentucky outchanged the game as far as pricing goes, and that kind of leads us into our next little segment here. There are more craft distilleries popping up around the country now more than ever before. So how do you find out the best stories and the best flavors? Rackhouse Whiskey Club is a Whiskey of the Month club, and they're on a mission to uncover the best flavors and stories that craft distilleries across the U.S. have to offer. Along with 2 bottles of hard-to-find whiskey, Rackhouse's boxes are full of cool merchandise that they ship out every 2 months to members in 40 states. In Rackhouse's June box, they're featuring a distillery that claims to be the first distillery to stout a whiskey. Rackhouse Whiskey Club is shipping out 2 bottles from there, including its beer barrel bourbon and beer barrel rye, both of which were finished in barrels that were once used to mature America's #1 selling bourbon barrel aged stout. And if you're a beer guy like me, you would know that's New Holland's Dragon Milk. Go to rackhousewhiskeyclub.com to check it out and try a bottle of beer barrel bourbon and beer barrel rye. Use code PURSUIT for $25 off your first box. I haven't actually tried it yet. Ryan and I would both have samples of Kentucky Out confiscated. However, there's a certain name. He's been on the podcast, Wade Woodard. It seems like he's on a mission to make Dixon feel really, really bad about himself. But he kind of looks at what Kentucky Out confiscated is as the what do you say, the speaker van, or right. Sorry, what was it? What was the analogy he used?
The guy selling speakers out of a white van.
Yeah, right. that analogy. Essentially saying that what they're doing is they're sourcing a bourbon, which everybody knows that Kentucky Owl is sourcing. However, they're putting no age statement on it. And they're selling it for around $100, $130 in some markets. So what do you guys see on the thoughts of the future? Do you think this is going to be leading the pack in regards of other people doing this? Or do you think this is going to be a one-off and who knows if it's going to sell through or not?
Well, I got a story. It's on the topic, but before we jump into it. So when my wife and I first got married, bought our house, we went furniture shopping. We're looking for a dining room set. And the first store we went to, small store, one salesman walked us through the whole store, told us everything we didn't want to know about furniture and everything about it. And we were enlightened, but also really kind of dazed and confused. Went to the next store and a very different experience. The person walking us around was, just kind of touching on things. And we came up to one set that was like $6,000. And she said, now this is the best set. And I'm looking at it. I didn't like the style of it. I didn't recognize at all what would make it better. And I said, why is this one the best one? And she looks and she was really stumped. And she looks at me with a straight face and says, well, it's just more expensive. And then moved on. If that was going to be the natural transition. So I wanted to say that before we jumped into this conversation, just as because this kind of reminded me of that in a sense as I started to dig into what's actually inside this bottle, trying to figure out what I've got here. I have a sample here too behind me.
Yeah, it's with the old adage, perception is reality. And if you price things high, people are automatically going to think it's premium or superior to all the everyday bourbons. Probably to everyday consumers, it does work. With us, we can kind of sniff it out, and but maybe that's not who they're trying to go after. So maybe they don't give a shit what we think, and they're going to price it that way anyways. And they should, and see what the market bears, because that's what business is all about. So if they pay it, why not? But you've
priced it right if they pay it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
mean-
I have not tried it, so I can't say it's worth it or not worth it. But it's hard to say that it's probably going to be worth it, but maybe it will be. We'll see.
Blake, have you kept count of how many posts that have been on your Facebook group about people holding bottles of it and saying, "Is this a good buy?"
Those all get deleted. Don't post any unopened bottle pictures to Bourboner. No, I mean,
I think I see at least one a week between either that or Houston Bourbon Society, one or the other.
yeah, no, it definitely is, and that's the thing is, like these bourbons and brands that are coming out now, they're not really made for the connoisseur. They're not made for the majority of the people watching this podcast. Like, I love what Dixon's doing, and he's an incredible blender, but at the end of the day, there's a sales machine behind it that's pricing this stuff and coming out with new brands and all that kind of stuff. So that's where I think we're just seeing the beginning of the actual pricing and, having a more expensive bottle. And I still don't think we've seen the real big money get into bourbon that we will in 5 or 6 years. I still think we're on the forefront of that when you look like what's going on with wine and Scotch and all that. And kind of to Nick's point of stores, people are going to walk in and say, "Oh, I want the best bourbon you have." They're just going to grab what's most expensive on the shelf. So I can't blame these brands for doing that. Now, am I going to be going out and spending my bottle or spending my money on those bottles or even suggesting people that this is the best buy? No, but I mean, if we just wanted to buy the best value, we'd buy nothing but, I don't know, Wild Turkey 101 or something. So to me, it's about trying something new, trying something different. If $130 doesn't set you back and it's between that and paying the mortgage that month, enjoy it, drink the bourbon, have fun. But don't get too caught up in the hype of just having an expensive bottle to buy. So I don't know. To me, it's gotten a little out of control, and it seems like Kentucky Owl is kind of getting the brunt of the force at times, when that's just where the market's going altogether.
Well, I think they get a little bit of the brunt because it is an NDP and it is NAS, and I think that's really where a lot of
there's a lot of that out. Well, maybe not the combination of both.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, we like Dixon too, and he's a good friend of the show and stuff like that. One thing I thought I just had, it was literally last week. Somebody was here in Louisville and they said, "I need to get a bottle of a bottle of bourbon for my friend's birthday." Somewhere around the $80 value, and I'm kind of like, "Geez, I don't even know." Yeah. And then they were like, "Wait, you host a bourbon podcast and you can't tell me one bourbon at $80?" But anyway, and this is kind of what could be there that fits that mold, sort of that higher premium tier category that, some people like us, we may not be in for it, but the regular Joe, that it's on the shelves, it has a high price tag. It's the perception that's there. Now, one Blake, one thing I want to kind of tail on to what you said there is you said that you don't think the real high dollar, high price tag of bourbon has come yet. I look at it and saying, I hope you're wrong, but kind of expand on what you're thinking there.
Yeah. So, I mean, just think about the bottles, the expensive bottles that you have sitting around now. And I had this conversation with somebody, I think it was last week or so. It was like, Pappy 23, secondary is probably $2,000, $2,500 at the most. There's guys spending, upwards of $30,000, $40,000 on a bottle of Scotch. There's guys spending, $1,000 on a bottle of wine like it's nothing. The wine's literally one sitting. So to a lot of this money, bourbon seems like a steal right now, even where we are. If I can go spend $3,000 on what's quote unquote the best bourbon available and the most sought after bourbon in the world, that's nothing for a lot of these guys. And I think we'll start seeing more and more of that money start to pour in as we go through the years. And, bourbon doesn't seem to be slowing down. So as much as we probably hate it as consumers and enthusiasts, the prices are just going to continue to go up and up and up. And, I don't see that slowing down anytime soon.
when the Kevin O'Learys of Shark Tank start making their way into this.
Whenever he starts buying Pappy and putting it on the show, we're all in trouble.
Yeah, when Blake said that, that caught my attention too, because I'm past the time now where it must have been 5-6 years ago. I figured by now I would have bought a still out of bankruptcy from some craft distiller who had failed, and the prices would be back down to where they were 10 years ago, and I was totally wrong. I mean, it's still going up, and you get new releases coming out at $150 and $200, and if the market bears it, it's with more fans coming on, it's going to keep going up.
And I think sorry, go ahead, Brian.
And no, I was just wrapping up on there. It's continuing to climb, and it surprises the hell out of me.
And I think what's interesting is if you kind of think about Scotch, and if you go to a store with a fairly deep selection, the Scotch that you see on the shelf and the price of the Scotch on the shelf. And if you go in the back room where, that same bottle for $3,000 has been there, the one for $5,000 has been there, and eventually somebody's going to buy it, this stuff is on the shelf all the time, and you kind of don't have this run on it. Whereas with bourbon, when you have these kind of higher cost releases, you're still getting the liquor store holding it in the back, parsing it out as something special for somebody. They touch the shelves, and a lot of times they're gone. I mean, there are the exceptions, of course, and I think we've tested that a little bit with, some of these releases. I mean, I know some of the Knob Creek releases that were special releases are still kind of hanging around, above the $100 mark. Some of the Wild Turkey releases are still kind of hanging around. So I think the market's kind of touched that a little bit with bourbon, and seen that in some cases it will, in some areas at least, sit for quite a while, and maybe doesn't have that same kind of momentum that Scotch has built up over time. But I do think we're still potentially on that precipice, on the beginning of, seeing the higher price stuff, but also seeing it as regular everyday stuff. Kind of think of it like Basil Hayden, which, around here is $40 to $50, sometimes a little bit more. There's nothing inherently really special about that besides what the label is, but in somebody's price range, that feels like a special bottle. It looks like a special bottle. For a lot of people, 80 proof is fine. They don't really want any more than that, and they're going to put it on the rocks anyway. So that same person, when they go hunting for that gift for somebody, and they don't see anything in bourbon for over $80 on the shelf because it's gone, or it's not there, or it's in the back room, and they're not going to sell it to them. They see something like this. They don't know about age statements. They don't know about the story. They're not going to Google it, any of that. Somebody's going to say, this is really good stuff. And they're going to say, well, it must be. It's $125. I'll take it. And I think we're going to see that happen. And that got me thinking too, because I was thinking about it. I said, I'm reading all the press releases, trying to dig into this. I've got a bunch of questions out to the company I'm waiting to hear back on. And, it's kind of, I think the non-age stated is kind of the thing that jumps out. But to me, it's more than that, because you definitely see, bourbons that don't have an age statement that are good, but it's more of the kind of like, just give me something about it, give me more than just the tasting notes. Bourbon, I think, kind of needs, for me at least, somewhat of a story with it, if it's not apparently obvious, where it's just, tell me more about it. Tell me how it came to be. Give me some background about this. I mean, the story could be kind of cool, but it's all right. There's nothing there. It's a name. I want to know more about what's in this bottle to make it feel a little bit more special if it's going to be up at 125 and I'm going to think about buying it.
Right. Yeah. I think we totally discount, because we are enthusiasts and we're on a bourbon community roundtable, how
because we sit at 10 o'clock at night already.
Yeah. How naive and kind of gullible shoppers are, everyday shoppers. And I'm reminded by this every time my wife sends me to go buy wine at the liquor store. I go and I have no idea. And I'm like, look, can somebody help me out here? What's a good value? What's a good bottle? Here. And, so it's, there is that at play. There's a lot of people getting into this game. And like you said, somebody shows me a $40 or $50 bottle of wine, which is expensive for wine because you have to drink in one sitting. I'm like, well, it's got to be pretty good. It's higher dollar, or, where if it's like the $7 or $8 wine, which it's probably good, and probably just as good as the 40 or 50. I'm like, we'll just, pass on that one. So,
so needless to say, we need to start upping our prices on everything to start fitting this new market, is what you're trying to say.
That's right.
Pretty much.
Well, I mean, when you think about what Blake just said, in having these crazy asinine releases or these scotches that are $30,000, there is a little bit of the market that is kind of getting hit with that right now. I mean, Buffalo Trace and Sazerac, they're doing their best to try to do it. You know, the OFC releases, the Double Eagle, very rare, you know, these $6,000 bottles, $9,000 bottles that, you know, we typically don't see at the retail store shelves. And that's actually probably another good point is that if you all saw one of those, would you buy it? Because at this point, you're kind of like, well, it could flip, but I don't want to know if I want to be a part of that or not.
Someone offered me Double Eagle, or Albatross. What are we calling that one? Whatever it was. And they said, hey, the distributor can probably get 2 bottles. Do you want them? I'm like, oh, yeah, I'll take them both. Absolutely. And then they ended up selling them to somebody else. And then I'm in the back of my head thinking, like, am I about to spend $3,800 on a slightly older Eagle Rare 17? You know, like, is that where we are in the game? But yeah, you get caught in the hype. You go and you see it selling for $5,000 or whatever it is, and you kind of think, oh man, this is smart. And you
this
talk
must
to
be good.
Yeah.
I mean, there's people out there that flip sport cars and you know, crazy stuff like that. So there's always a market for that.
So don't steal this blog post idea because it's still in the works. But
You're lucky because we don't blog.
We don't write.
Yeah. I've started like collecting stories from all these other enthusiasts, which talk about, you know, what's the most expensive thing in their field. And there's like I was talking to my uncle about it, and he was telling me about these wood duck decoys where guys are spending $6,000-$7,000 for a wood duck decoy. I'm like, okay, if somebody can spend that much for a wood duck decoy or a putter because it's, you know, Scotty Cameron used it to putt left-handed once, you know, if there's all these other things, maybe bourbon's not as dumb and as crazy as I think, but, you know, every hobbyist and enthusiast kind of has their thing in their, you know, in their little circle. And to them, it seems crazy. To outside people, it seems real crazy. But at the end of the day, if the money's there, the money's there.
Yep, absolutely.
That's how you explain it to your wife, Blake, when you buy those bottles.
If you're listening now, Danielle, it's not crazy.
When you buy the
Buy
wood
it all,
ducks.
Blake. Buy it all.
Yeah.
That's when you have those secret credit cards stashed.
I want to see the wood ducks. I'm kind of intrigued by that.
That's what I
can't wait
asked
for the
him,
blog
like,
post.
What in the world is that? He's like, well, you know, Ernest Hemingway, or I don't know what he is. I kind of lost track after he said wood ducks. But
It sounds like a bourbon story. So
yeah.
Really cool.
Good
So the
name
last,
for a bourbon.
yeah, absolutely. Wooden duck and horses. It'll all come together and it'll sell. So the last thing we want to hit on, kind of leave this on a high note, is it's kind of basically, I think it's out there now. There was a TTB article. I saw somebody that had a distillery sample already. So I think it's going to pretty much be solid at this point that Wild Turkey has announced, and they are releasing their next limited edition Master's Keep. And it is going to be called Cornerstone. It is a rye, a 17-year rye, priced at around $175, hitting the shelves in August. And it's looking to be about 15,000 bottles available nationwide, which is a pretty good release. So anybody excited for this one to kind of see a rye come out of this, considering I think the past couple of years, we haven't even seen a Russell's Reserve rye on the shelf?
Take notes, Heaven Hill and Parker's Heritage Collection.
yeah.
No more.
No, I mean, I'm really excited about this. You know, I think the need for a little bit of an older rye. What's it is barrel proof?
Yeah, 109 proof.
Okay.
I'm not
Which, you know, in
sure
Wild
if that's
Turkey
true.
and the Master's Keep,
That's
Certainly
probably-
could be.
probably
17
pretty
years
close.
ago, that
Yeah.
might have gone in at 107.
I mean, that's
No.
I'm more excited about that than any other release I've seen in 2019. So
Not even the most recent Orphan Barrel with the big old buffalo on it.
that was up there. What was that called? Bad Decisions or shit?
It's a Scotch, isn't it?
It is. It's like a 20-something-year-old Scotch, something like that.
Hard to believe with how light the color looks in the pictures.
Yeah. Well,
The
anyway, let's get back to turkey. This isn't Scotch.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for Wild Turkey. You know, I feel like some of their first few kind of limited releases, at least that I kind of get into, they didn't hit the mark for me. I feel like they've been getting better and better. They're certainly, very capable. So, I feel like we're just waiting for some more of those limited releases from them to just be some of the magic bottles, and really have the people in the story and everything behind it, to back all that up. So I'm excited for everything they're doing, and excited to see something different. Excited to see a rye. I love ryes. I'm a big fan of ryes. So whenever there's a limited release rye, I'm typically into it.
Camped out, you mean?
Yeah.
On that point, they say that Jimmy's not a fan of rye. So when this got announced that it's going to be a rye, that surprised me. But I'm still really excited about it. To have that age, that does mean that it probably went in at 107. It's definitely going to be worth trying. So I'm excited about it.
The question is, will you buy as many as you bought of the diamonds?
We can't let that die.
No.
Well, that's funny
I
because
will not do that.
well, Jimmy wasn't a fan of it. Was the diamond, was he? Because of the age. Because of the age. I mean, they talked
Right.
about the age being more than what he obviously liked,
And
which
they
I thought was
actually dialed it back from test
Interesting.
blends. I had
Yeah.
a test blend that had more age in it, and that I, in whatever my opinion's worth, I thought was better. But yeah, so he's got you got to defer to him to some extent, no doubt about that. I'm not going to try to trump him. But hearing that he doesn't like rye and hearing that this one is a rye kind of confused me. But I'm all over it for that age and that proof and what that probably went into the barrel at. That's bound to be good.
Yeah, I think they're making way for the new blood, because we were down doing our barrel pick of Russells, and Bruce, Eddie's son, he's a huge rye fan, and he let us taste some fantastic rye barrels, and I'm really excited about this one. I think Wild Turkey's kind of whiffed on a bunch of special releases, and I'm hoping that this one is kind of a home run, because the ryes that me and Kenny tasted there were fantastic, and I'm excited for this.
Yeah, I'm pulling for him on it.
That is kind of interesting.
Sure.
You think about the misses. It seems like the Russell's brand has seemed to done pretty well with the 1998 and the 2002.
2002.
But then the Masters Keeps. I mean, some of them have been pretty good, but for the majority, they just kind of sit on the shelves. So it will be interesting to see if this kind of changes the tide a little bit for them.
I know, and it's surprising because Russell picks are so good.
Mhm.
Like, they're one of my favorites to do, and it's like, how can they not get the limited releases down? It's like something's not connecting there. But hopefully this one's hopefully they hit it out of the park with this one.
Well, it's like they're trying to make the limited releases somewhere out of the bounds, almost out of the bounds of that sweet spot of, 10, 12 years old, and, the sweet spot with the proof and everything. And so you say, well, we can't just do that and bottle the same thing, we put in Russell's Reserve single barrel or whatever it might be. So it's got to be different. It's got to be older or different proof or, something like that. And I think that's what the struggle's been, is because they have kind of been so good at that sweet spot that now it's, well, we got to get outside the sweet spot to make this thing special. So what do we do? And I think that's been their challenge.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's hard to make a limited release if you just put a limited release out that's like Camp Nelson F at 10 years old. Like, everybody be like, wait a second. We go and select these all day for $55. Are you kidding me? So yeah, they do have a little bit of an issue when it comes to that. But yeah, I mean, I think everybody's pulling for them. Everybody's kind of really been, this has actually probably been the worst kept secret in bourbon for the longest time. Everybody sort of knew that there was going to be some aged rye release happening at some point. So we're glad that it's finally out there in the open, and I'm excited for it. Hopefully get my hands on a bottle or two, and hopefully it's better than Diamond, right? That's all we can really hope for.
That's all we need. That's the bar.
The bar has been set.
Yeah.
Yep.
So with that, let's go ahead and we will wrap it up. So again, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on tonight and joining us on this 200th episode. Couldn't have picked out a better way for this to happen. Just sheer luck that it just happened to be dropped on the third week of when we do these. So it just, you think I started planning this out 32 roundtables ago, but it didn't actually happen that way. So let you go ahead and kind of close out each one of yourselves. So Blake, go ahead and go first.
Yeah. Once again, thanks for having me. You know, we always like to come on here and joke around, have a good time, but it's always fun. So Ryan, Kenny, thanks for doing this. It's, you know, hopefully we'll have another 200 here to come soon. So, and the way y'all crank things out, it'll be what, 4 years
About
or
3
less?
months.
But no, so I'm Blake from bourboner.com and sealbox.com. Like I said, you can find me on all the social medias, BOURBONR, and then SEELBACHS.
.com.
All right, Brian, you're up, buddy.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, guys, too. This has been great. It's been a great run. Looking forward to more. I'm Brian from Sippin' Corn. Find me on the social medias, SIPPNCORN, and bourbonjustice.com. Please do check it out on Amazon. I think it's on sale right now. Makes we got some Mother's Day and Father's Day coming up. Makes a great gift. Thanks, guys.
And I am Nick with Breaking Bourbon, breakingbourbon.com. Find us online, social media. Everything's at Breaking Bourbon, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And I want to say, thank you guys for hosting it. You know, I just show up, for the hour or whatever, but I know a lot goes into doing this. And, I think it's, in what we see here, this hour that, that people see, what I think about too is now we've been to Kentucky a couple times, hung out in person. We did the community roundtable barrel, a little over a year ago, so all that I think really just kind of started from doing this. And, I think that's what's really exciting about it is the friendships and the connections that, that come out of it. So excited to be here. And next we'll be doing our 200th Bourbon Community Roundtable. So that'll be many in the future, but, at some
Blake
point,
will be there
I believe it'll happen. So, thanks, guys.
Oh, we'll all be somebody will be definitely bald by then. That'll have to happen because that's
Don't
what
put that on there. I have a high forehead. It has nothing to do with receding.
Yeah, my hair moves from here to everywhere else. So that's
And before Ryan, you close this out, I also have to say, of course, thank you to you guys, but also thank you very much to our community that helps support this podcast. I don't think anybody really understands the amount of effort that it takes to go and publish this and do this, and what the community that's helped support this on Patreon. As I'd mentioned before, this podcast almost ended a few years ago because we didn't really see a light at the end of the tunnel. It was just kind of just kept digging a hole and we didn't really know where we were going. But now we kind of have 200 episodes later, we finally have our groove. I think we have things figured out. So it's great to have our community behind us that really helps support this and keeps it going. So thank you to everybody out there that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to piggyback off what Kenny said, I'm kind of like Nick. I just show up for an hour and talk as well. So kudos to Kenny. He does a lot for the show and has made, my dream and vision a reality. And I just want to say thank you, Kenny, for keeping that going. And through the times, that we're not as fruitful as it is now, a lot of people don't realize how much work goes in. Like tomorrow we have a conference call about, all right, what are our next guests? When are we going to interview them? When are we going to do the calendar? There's just so much work that's involved and we're just so grateful and thankful that people listen to us and they hang out with us. We've created great relationships with this in this community with our Patreon fans. It's super humbling and just grateful for everyone involved. So, and with that, I'll give a gift for this 200th episode. I just got this for my birthday from a good buddy at Heaven Hill. It's the old Fitzgerald Bald and Bond. Hadn't been released yet. It'll be released in spring sometime. The 13 year. Just open it up, and it's by far the best one they've done and the best thing I've had this year. So just a little tidbit there. So anyways, thanks everyone for listening in and where to find us on all the socials. Kenny does all that, but appreciate everyone listening, and we'll see y'all next on episode 400 in a few years.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.